The questions first. Tonight we only have one. It comes from Declan from Upcomer. What was your personal highlight and low light for your team this season?
Wait down on.
Oh, you said off.
Sorry.
Do you want to go first or me?
You can go first.
The question or highlight and low light of the season, right? Or the year?
Of the season, yeah, summer season.
For me, I would say starting off with obvious low points. When we had turmoil with our roster, we had to make some decisions to move some players around. Whenever you're thrown into that situation, it's never easy to navigate. There's definitely things we could have done better, but I would say that's a pretty obvious low point for us. As far as a high point, I think today's a pretty good example of that. From my perspective, going into the year, most people had us slated for 9th or 10th, right? I'm sure you can go back and just Google or YouTube and you'll find 10 videos that are saying that. And for us, we just finished second split, finishing top 6 again. So for me, that definitely feels like a pretty big accomplishment, and I'm sure everyone else feels the same.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's very much the same. I think have a group of guys who are newer than most players. They're also only from North America. We are the only team to have all players from North America, and it's just been a massive achievement from the guys to come and improve. They can compete at the top, to take games off 100 Thieves, TSM, Team Liquid as well, and it's been great watching them grow. So really happy to secure a slot in the upper bracket.
Okay, we're gonna open the floor up to live questions. If you have any, raise your hand and I'll call your name. Pedro, you can go first.
Hey guys, congrats on qualifying for the upper bracket. You guys did so in a LCS that is filled with imported players. And as you guys mentioned, you've already did so with an all NA lineup. Excuse me for that. What does it say about the domestic talent for the LCS, not just for now but for the future?
I mean, the first thing is that obviously everyone has noticed how important it is to develop talent. So we've seen Riot completely overhaul the system with Amateur and Academy this year. We've seen additional investment in that as well. And we've seen lots of teams take steps to make sure we are giving our talent the best resources they can have to develop, especially here at Dignitas. 3 of our players would not have even made the LCS if it wasn't for them being here on this team. And that's just massive. Take those players and show that North America does have talent, and they do have the ability to go out there and win games. So I think every other team looking at Dignitas has realized there is NA talent out there, and we've seen the resources increase to the point where I think next year we can see some other teams following our footsteps.
Declan, you can go.
Hi, yeah. I was just wondering how you guys at Dignitas utilize statistics and analytics in League of Legends to inform decisions around either roster moves, player evaluations, or even something as granular in coaching as like champion picks.
Sure, I can answer that one. So as far as data and statistics I'll speak for League of Legends, but I think this is esports in general. It becomes pretty obvious that the game isn't really a dichotomy. Not everything is black and white. I think you should always use stats to be able to kind of build up what your eye test is. I think this is the same in traditional sports. When you're evaluating players, you're always going to balance out using the perspective from people that have been watching the game or working with players for a while, in addition to, okay, well, how are they actually performing by the numbers? When it comes to champ picks and things like this, I think all teams are the same. We're tracking our scrim data, so we have an idea of what we're performing well on and what we need to work on. But when you're running into the LCS, it's not always as simple as, okay, we're going to pick all of our highest win rate champions, right? I mean, you can do that to a point, but eventually you're going to realize you're not really well-rounded. So there's a lot of times teams are going to opt into something that isn't their highest rated champions, right? As far as how they're winning in scrims. But even when it goes into roster building, you look at how laners are performing, but a lot of those decisions come into, okay, can we listen to VODs and hear how the communication sounds? Can we get to know them as people to understand what their values are and how they're going to mesh with the players that we already have on our staff, right? So I would say at Dignitas, we definitely use those things, but I would also say we're an org that's looking to try to push those things forward, where there's a lot that's undiscovered within esports. As far as like Riot giving access to the API and things like that, you can start to see a world where there are definitely possibilities if people are willing to invest and put time into those things, right?
Yeah, and on that note, the thing that I always find interesting about stats is that we know we have access to so many, right? We have goal difference, jungle proximity, forward percentage. I know the basics like KDA, kills, etc. The thing that we really don't know is like, there is no single algorithm that tells you this set of stats is the thing that gives you the best chance to win the game. And I think with our partners with Horizon, that's something that we're just starting to explore now, is to give a calculation or a formula that tells you exactly what stats are the most optimal to give you the highest chance to win. So I think that's probably the next step, and that's the next evolution to see where we're going in the future.
Declan, you can go.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I was just wondering, how exactly do you plan to, you said push forward on data. Does that involve outside firms hiring like data analysts internally? I'm just kind of curious on what exactly that looks like substantially in the future, if you have any idea.
So we have Jim Marson, who's our head analyst. He handles all the stats at Dignitas. He's a fantastic guy, been around for quite a few years in the LCS. He's the one that's really pushing this forward and finding new ways to use this data and find new data. And with regards to working with outside firms, we employ some third parties to help us manage the stats that we track and that we use to work with our partners with Horizon, as I mentioned earlier, to really push it forward and find some new ways to have stats that no one else has access to.
Pedro, you can go.
With the playoff seeding and the upper bracket all set, how are you guys going to tackle the next two games? Are you going to take it like in a different note, or is it just going to be the same as it did during the preparation phase?
I won't do too much, just as far as strategy, but from my perspective, the next few games are good opportunities for us to continue getting experience, especially for our young guys moving into playoffs. In spring, we fell short of what our goals and expectations were, and I think, especially for the young guys that were there for that, like guys like Fate God and Neo, they have an idea of how they want to be able to approach this playoffs differently, and the fact that we get to play against two of the top teams the next 2 days is a good opportunity just to kind of test some strategies maybe, but more so just continue to work on what we're trying to achieve, which is we play consistent games on the stage that are at the level that we expect from ourselves.
You can go again, Declan.
Yeah, I was just wondering, going into playoffs, you guys have been playing with Yusui recently. I was just wondering if Seligo will be on the bench, or there'll be conversations about who's going to be starting coming up for playoffs.
Sure. Internally, we're working in Seligo with scrim times. A lot of teams have been starting up night blocks as well. So there's a few more games that you get during the week that you wouldn't normally, which the normal would be 15, right? We want to be able to make sure that we're giving ourselves as many options as far as making sure our strategy. And these are things that we've been working on consistently for the last few weeks, whether that be internal scrim, so we can evaluate both sides. We can see different styles and how the champion or the players play. This is something we're going to continue to evaluate moving through playoffs.
Yeah, to add to that, I would say we definitely see Seligo as LCS ready, as is Yusui, and we will pick the best player we can find, depending on the series and the situation.
Okay, that wraps up the time for our scrum. We appreciate you answering our questions. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.